I used to believe that a mother's love could protect you from public humiliation, that if you carried a child through fevers and rent notices and nights where the lights went out, the world would at least grant you mercy on the day he married. But love, I've learned, is not a shield. Sometimes it's just a mirror. And on my son's wedding day, it reflected a truth I wasn't ready to see. My name is Lynn. I'm 47 years old, a seamstress who learned to sew because fabric listens when people don't. I raised my son Min alone, one room above a grocery, then a basement suite near the bus depot, then a small studio lined with spools of thread and a cot against the wall. I carried other people's hems and torn sleeves the way I carried us, carefully, quietly, with the hope that if I stitched enough, life would stop unraveling. Min grew up under the hum of my old singer machine, falling asleep to the rhythm of needle and pedal, dreaming beside baskets of half-finished dresses I promised I would complete before morning. He was the only thing I ever finished perfectly. The invitation to his wedding came printed on thick cream paper, our last names spelled elegantly in a font I'd never be able to afford. His fiancée Anne came from a family whose silver was actual silver, whose dinner tables were long enough that conversations traveled like ferry boats from one end to the other. I met her mother once, a woman whose bracelets chimed when she lifted a glass, whose smile slid across her face without a wrinkle. Lynn, she'd said, studying my hands as if reading a horoscope written in calluses, "You must be very proud." I told her I was. I didn't tell her I was also tired down to the bone. On the morning of the wedding, I ironed the only dress I owned that could pretend to be new, if you didn't look too closely, a dark blue wrap that I had adjusted for myself so many times it knew my body better than I did. My hair refused to cooperate, so I pinned it back and prayed my face still remembered how to smile. Min sent a car to pick me up. I sat in the back seat with my hands folded, watching neighborhoods blur into places where the sidewalks were so clean they looked ironed too. The venue was a hotel that smelled of lilies and fresh money. White orchids stood like polite sentries, and the floor glowed as if it had been kissed by every sunrise since the building existed. I walked past tables dressed in linen so thick it sighed, found my seat, with my name printed in gold above a little row of words. It took me a second to understand the letters, to realize they were meant to be a compliment shaped like a knife. The nameplate said, "Low-educated fake mom." If the word had been shouted, I could have flinched, thrown my body against anger, and protected what little dignity I had left. But the insult sat there quietly like cut flowers, in an expensive vase. No screaming, no mess, just a neat arrangement of cruelty. For a long breath, I didn't move. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that small rectangle of cardstock and the gold ink that glinted like laughter. Someone cleared his throat behind me. The event planner, a young man wearing courage made of clipboard and headset, approached with a cautious smile. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" I looked up at him, then back at the nameplate. "It's misspelled," I said softly, and even I wasn't sure what I meant. The young man blinked, glanced at the card, and froze. He stammered something about checking the seating chart and scurried away, his shoes squeaking like apologies. I could have walked out then. Perhaps I should have. But some humiliations pin your feet to the floor, and I stood there with my heart beating loud enough to count time, thinking of the first uniform shirt I ever stitched for Min, the one with sleeves just long enough to convince him the world could grow to meet him. He was 11 then. He wore it until the elbows turned thin as breath. "Mom." His voice, a familiar door opening, arrived before he did, and I straightened my spine the way I always did before he walked into a room. Min looked beautiful in a suit that fit like a promise. He kissed my cheek, eyes shining with all the ceremony's reflected light. "You look amazing." I swallowed the metallic taste of the moment and smiled. "You too, Khan." He followed my gaze to the nameplate and went very still. In that stillness, I searched for the boy who used to defend me against boys on bikes, who once split his lip, telling a stranger not to call me the cleaning lady outside our building. I expected outrage, immediate movement, the protective heat that flares in sons who know the cost of their mother's nights. Instead, something flickered across his face I had only ever seen in other families in living rooms, where the furniture had never been moved to make space for a cot. It looked like calculation. It looked like fear dressed as strategy. "Mom, listen." He began, lowering his voice. It's just a joke. A stupid one. An's cousins are sometimes they try to be funny. Funny, I repeated. The word dropped between us like a coin no one wanted to pick up. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'll ask them to fix it. Please don't make a scene. The request landed like a hand on my mouth. Don't make a scene. As if the scene had not been built around me already. I nodded once because mothers learn early how to swallow their own names to keep a peace that doesn't belong to them. He squeezed my shoulder relieved and left to greet a table where men wore watches with faces big enough to reflect an entire ceiling. I sat. I tucked the card under my plate as if hiding a child from rain. I folded my hands and listened to the soft, sticky sounds of happiness, the clatter of champagne flutes, the rustle of chiffon, the murmurs of congratulations, layered like tissue paper. Every now and then, a guest would glance my way, and their eyes would slide off me, the way eyes do when they don't know where to place a person who doesn't match the furniture. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The aisle looked like a river of petals that had given up flying. An walked toward my son in a dress that must have required a team of hands to coax into place. I watched her father's face as he gave her away the certainty of a man who had never worried if the lights would stay on. When the vows began, I closed my eyes and listened the way you listen at a doctor's office when you want to know but don't want to hear. I promised to honor, to cherish, to protect. I had written those promises in stitches and soup, and the small, steady warmth of my body beside my son's on nights when fevers asked for a different kind of prayer. At the reception, the speeches started with laughter and ended with liquor. An's mother stood and told the story of how the couple met, editing out everything that didn't fit the narrative of two families joining like matching bracelets. When it was my turn, they didn't call my name. The MC skipped from father of the bride to best man so smoothly you would think I had been an imagined detail the whole time. I raised my glass anyway, whispered a blessing into the bubbles, and let it disappear into my mouth where blessings sometimes go to become strength. Between courses, a waiter with kind eyes slipped a folded cloth next to my plate. Inside it lay the nameplate. The insult had been crossed out with a thick black marker. My name remained a little wounded but visible. He whispered, "I'm so sorry the way people apologize for crimes they didn't commit, because the real criminals are protected by music and money." I nodded. "Thanks," I said, and kept my voice from breaking by remembering the first time Min laughed at the movies, his head thrown back, his small teeth public with joy. Near the end of the night, I went looking for air and found a cluster of laughing girls near the corridor to the powder room. One of them was holding a stack of extra place cards like a deck of future insults. Another pointed at me, her laugh jagged and bright. "Is that her?" she asked as if I were a photograph they'd been passing around. They fell silent when I met their eyes, and I saw something familiar. Curiosity, Cruelty's younger sister. I didn't look away. I held their gaze until they dropped it, each one suddenly fascinated by her bracelet, her phone, her drink. I walked past them and stood at the sink running water over my wrists like cooling a fever. I looked at myself in the mirror. The face looking back was tired but not broken. It belonged to a woman who had carried a boy to his own future and forgotten to save a seat for herself. "It's just a joke," I told the woman in the mirror. She didn't laugh. On my way back to the ballroom, I overheard a conversation in the hallway. Two men's voices wrapped around a secret like ribbon around a gift. It was An's idea, one of them said, drunk sincerity making him generous with the truth. She said the old lady could use a reminder to behave. "Imagine parading in here like someone." Min agreed, the other asked. A pause. He said, "Don't make a scene." Same thing, no. A glass shattered inside me without making a sound. I stood very still, like the floor might tilt if I moved. When they walked past me, they didn't recognize the person their words had built. I waited until the corridor emptied, and then I walked into the ballroom where my son was laughing with a group of guests who laugh the way people do when they are sure they are safe. I have never admired violence, but there are moments when the body imagines it, plates thrown a scream like a blade clearing space. Instead, I picked up my purse, tucked the scarred nameplate inside like evidence, and walked toward the exit, collecting myself in each step. Someone called my name. It was my son's. It always was. I didn't turn. Mothers learn how to listen without obeying. Outside, the night smelled like ocean and spilled champagne. The valet brought a car that did not belong to me. I shook my head, and he blushed, and in that small human mistake, I found the softness of the world again. My bus stop was 3 blocks away. I walked there in the shoes I had resoled twice this year, the city lights snagging on sequins I had sewn myself. At the stop, I sat on the bench and laid the nameplate on my lap, the word fake staring back at me like a bad photograph. A woman sat beside me, her dress lilac, her feet bare. She had the look of someone who had taken off her shoes as an act of survival. She nodded at the card. Rough party, she asked, not unkindly. Rough family, I said, and surprised myself with the calm in my voice. She hummed. They never deserve us, she said, as if reciting something she had learned by heart. The bus arrived. She stood, and before boarding she added, "Good luck, Chi." Sister. The word wrapped around me like a shawl. When I reached my apartment, I did what I always do when the world tries to tell me what I am. I took out fabric. I pulled my old singer into the pool of light on my table and fed the machine a square of plain cotton. The needle dipped and rose, stitching a line as steady as a heartbeat. After a while, my own heart matched it. I found a piece of smooth ribbon and stitched the name Lynn onto it, then unpicked it and stitched it again slower. My name written by my own hands, a small ceremony I could actually control. I slept for 3 hours and woke with a clarity that felt like morning in spring. Not rage, plan. People think revenge is a fire, mine would be a loom. Min called that afternoon. His voice was tired and Love tried to walk back into the room. "Me, can we talk?" he asked, using the old word he forgot when he is trying to impress strangers. "I'm sorry about the card. They took it too far." I asked. He exhaled. "You know how it is." "I do," I said. "I know exactly how it is." I could have told him then that I'd heard him, that I'd learned what his silence meant, that I knew whose idea had planted that seed. But seeds are only worth anything if you know where to plant them. "Come by tomorrow. Bring your wife." He hesitated. "Is that a good idea?" "It's the only one," I said softly. "There are things I need to give you." He agreed, and when I hung up, I stood in the square of sunlight that lay across my floor like a blessing. I took the nameplate from my purse and placed it on the table. Then I reached for the old shoebox under my bed and lifted the lid on a secret I had promised myself I would never need to open. Neatly stacked letters, a photocopy of a birth certificate, 2 photographs that yellowed at the edges like tired teeth. The first man I ever loved stood on a dock in a borrowed suit holding a bouquet he never got to deliver. The second photo was of me holding a newborn wrapped in a blanket I had stitched between contractions. There are family secrets that rot quietly like fruit left in a drawer. There are others that harden into seeds and wait for the right season. Mine belonged to both kinds. I gathered the documents, smoothed them on the table, and exhaled the breath I'd been holding for 27 years. The past had asked for silence to protect the present. The present had lied and asked for my silence again. No. Tomorrow the story would change rooms. Tomorrow we would find out what fake meant when the truth stood up and asked for a seat at the table. The next afternoon arrived quiet and bright, the kind of deceptive sunlight that makes the world look gentler than it feels. I set 2 chairs by my small kitchen table, placed a pot of tea between them, and arranged the documents from the shoebox beneath an embroidered cloth. Every stitch in that cloth was mine, sewn years ago, during nights when I didn't have the strength to speak to anyone. I'd always believed there was safety in silence. Now I understood silence could also be a weapon. The doorbell rang. Mean stood there with An, both dressed as if attending another rehearsal for their perfect life. He looked nervous. She looked annoyed. Her perfume filled the hallway before her words did. "I didn't think you'd want us here after yesterday," she said, a half smile curving like a blade. "I want you here," I said. "Please sit." Min shifted uncomfortably, his eyes moving from the walls lined with spools of thread to the single-framed photograph of him at age 8, grinning with missing teeth. "Mom, I know you're angry, but can we just talk about this without what?" I asked softly. Without truth. He hesitated, without turning it into something it's not. Then let's make sure we know what it is. I pulled the folded cloth away. The papers beneath caught the light like confession. The first page was the hospital record, the second the letter I had written 27 years ago, the one I never mailed, and frowned. What's this? Your education is better than mine. I said, the words measured calm. You can read it. She skimmed the letter, first the color draining from her face before she moved to the next page. Min leaned closer, his brow furrowed. Mom, what is this? It's the truth about your father, I said. The man you think abandoned us. He blinked, stunned. You said he died before I was born. He didn't, I said quietly. He left because he didn't know you were his. I kept it that way. Anne's mouth fell open. Why would you? Because his family made it clear they would never accept a seamstress as his wife, I said. And because I knew if I told him, they would have taken you from me. I chose poverty over pity. And I never regretted it. Until yesterday, when my own son stood beside people who mocked me for the very sacrifices that built his life. Min sat back, his face pale. You lied to me. Yes, I said, to protect you. I stitched that lie into every shirt you wore, every meal you ate. But you tore it out yesterday when you chose their laughter over my name. For a moment, the only sound was the kettle cooling on the stove. Then Min whispered, Who was he? His name was Than, I said. He owned a small printing company, the one that prints the invitations for families like On's. He married soon after he left me, had another son. You even went to school with him once, though neither of you knew. Anne's voice trembled, soft and sharp. Why are you telling us this now? I looked at her, not unkindly. Because yesterday, someone decided to call me a fake. And I realized that the only way to erase a lie that deep is to dig until it bleeds. She folded her arms. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Min said, his voice shaking. You humiliated her, On. You let them call her that. Your mother plays the victim well, she shot back. I smiled, and for the first time it wasn't out of pain. If you think I'm the victim, you misunderstand the story. I've already survived everything that could destroy me. Min's phone buzzed, his father-in-law, perhaps wondering what was taking so long. He ignored it. His eyes were wet when he finally spoke. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, I said. You live with it. You let the truth sit beside you at every meal, at every anniversary, until you learn to say my name without shame. And rose, abruptly snatching her purse. We shouldn't have come. This is manipulation. I reached for the small box beside the papers and opened it. Inside lay a ring, simple, worn with a tiny crack running through the band. Than gave this to me the day he asked me to marry him, I said. I kept it because it reminded me that promises, even broken ones, can be beautiful. I want you to have it. She looked startled. Why? Because one day when lies surround you, I want you to remember how heavy truth feels in your hand. Maybe you'll choose it sooner than I did. She stared at me for a long second, before leaving the echo of her heels trailing down the hallway. Min stayed seated, staring at the ring she'd left behind. I don't deserve forgiveness, he whispered. Maybe not yet, I said, but you deserve the chance to learn. He looked at the papers again. What do I tell them, her family? The truth, I said simply. Tell them the woman they mocked taught you how to stand upright even when the world tries to bend you. He nodded slowly. Will you come home with me? This is home, I said. But when you're ready to bring honesty into yours, I'll visit. He stood, leaned down, and kissed the top of my head, a small, uncertain gesture, but enough to make the years fold gently around us. When the door closed behind him, the apartment fell quiet again. I sat back, closed my eyes, and let the tears come not from grief this time, but release. Weeks passed. Word of the wedding humiliation spread, then twisted, then dissolved into other people's gossip. Min called every Sunday. He came alone the first few times, then one evening he arrived with An, who stood in the doorway holding a box of pastries like an apology she couldn't say aloud. She didn't stay long, but when she left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was a card printed on fine paper, for the woman who stitched strength into silence. No signature, just that. Sometimes redemption doesn't announce itself. It slips quietly into your life, written in ink you can't see until you hold it to the light. Now when I sew, I keep the nameplate on my desk. The black marker still hides the insult, but the gold letters of my name shine through. The machine hums, the thread runs smooth, And in the rhythm of needle and fabric, I hear the sound of forgiveness, learning how to breathe. If my story found you tonight, if it reminded you that dignity survives, even when love forgets its manners, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories born from quiet strength. And tell me in the comments, have you ever rebuilt respect where there was once shame?